When I look back at my life, I see various patterns of relationships that I keep trying to replicate and conflate. One of these types of people who have been ever present in my life, one of these archetypes, is the dysfunctional crush. Now, this is not really present anymore, at least not anywhere to as strong of an extent. But especially when I was younger, I used to get incredibly attached and obsessed with various people, and they were generally the same type of person. They were very mentally ill. They were generally unhappy with their life. And I didn't even really want to be in a relationship with them because I wouldn't have known how to be in a relationship. But I constantly kept thinking that I wanted to be in a relationship with them. Because at that point in time I had not experienced relationship, and I couldn't really work through my very juvenile feelings because I didn't think my feelings mattered unless they were somehow formalized. Now this attitude stopped after my first relationship, which is one of the only good things I can say about that relationship. As after that happened, I didn't really have these reactions anymore. But I constantly just used to be incredibly obsessive. I used to be manipulative and needy because I just wanted to experience closeness with another person. And it was really easy for me to seek closeness with people who themselves needed help. I was never under any illusion that I could really help them. But since the way that my brain worked at the time was very manipulative, very juvenile, I thought that if they were in a relationship with me, then I could do something. I didn't know what. I've still had moments where I feel about people this way, of course. But this type of relationship just hasn't been replicated, really. Well, it kinda has, but nowhere near this extent. And even more so, I just could not really find it in myself to care that much, since most of these feelings have always been caused by a lack of good friends, and right now I have too many good friends. I can't possibly keep up with all of them because I only have a very limited social capacity. But it is how it is. Another archetype that I've consistently gravitated to is an older woman to serve as somewhat of a motherly figure for me. This again is a pattern that doesn't really happen anymore, but it used to be very consistent throughout most of my life, where I just used to gravitate towards older women to get life advice from, to get help from when it comes to figuring out my life, and who generally could serve as a type of role model, I guess. Most of my somewhat functional relationships, or friendships rather, I have had when I was younger were with these types of people, because these were the one type of person who I could sincerely give. Also, this isn't a Nazi flag, it's just a weird flag that kind of looks like a Nazi flag for some reason. But yeah, these are the only types of people who I could have somewhat of a healthy emotional distance with. since to me they served um, as people to guide me, in a sense, I guess. And most of the decisions I've made in my entire life were made with the feedback of some of these people. Because I was too lost and confused to ever really figure out what to do. And it was very important to me to have people to guide me in this way. And it was really helpful. Another type of person who I've gravitated to a lot is the more masculine older figure. Now, through history, those have been both people who I get into romantic relationships with, but also really close friends I've had, or people who are in friend groups that were really important for me, and they introduced me to those friend groups. These types of people are more complicated for me to explain, because the first two types are very easy, and at this point they're both in the past, so I don't really need to have that much emotional rawness when I discuss them. But this type of person still encapsulates a lot of the people who I'm friends with. In the most basic sense, I think that I often gravitate to these types of people is because I generally tend to get along better with women. I generally tend to have an easier time being friends with women. So when I see more masculine people who I can be friends with and who I can myself express my masculinity to, I get incredibly excited, because I like to think of myself as a fairly androgynous person. But in social situations where I have to talk to women, there is necessarily a type of femininity that's present in those interactions. There is necessarily a type of emotional interaction that can't really be avoided. And the problem with that is that I can't really reciprocate that. So even though I act in a more feminine manner when I talk to more feminine people, it generally ends up in me kind of acting like a doormat, because I feel incredibly guilty when I express any of my own feelings or thoughts or desires, because it always seems like my feelings aren't strong enough to be worthy of being expressed. And I feel a lot of empathy whenever people describe really strong emotions, because I never have emotions that strong, so I just kind of assume that when people have emotions that are incredibly strong, that they are constantly terrified and they're constantly in pain, even when those emotions are positive. And to an extent that is obviously true, right? To an extent it is an accurate assessment, because strong emotions are by necessity strong. However, I doubt that when it comes to people who consistently feel stronger emotions, that they would provoke a similar reaction that they would to me. Because if I experienced a strong positive or negative emotion, I think I would just be more terrified and confused than what the emotion itself actually is. Because the sheer shock of feeling something strongly would probably immediately send me into some type of tailspin of increasing disassociation. And even though I'm constantly disassociated, there are degrees, right? There's what I constantly am, which is I can't really connect myself to my life. I can't really place myself in the context of how I'm living. But there's the further form of disassociation where it feels like an out-of-body experience where all of your emotions shut down. And those are generally fairly terrifying to me. So I just assume that whenever someone has a really strong emotion, since I only have strong emotions in really rare cases and really extreme cases, it means that they are in a very rare and extreme case, and thus demand my full attention, because I'm very rarely in a case that I would consider to be rare, right? So it's really hard for me to express myself in those situations. And even when there's a more calm moment, when there's a more neutral moment, I constantly feel like I shouldn't bring up any of my issues because it would ruin that moment, right? If I talked about myself, it would just create another intense experience that I don't want to have. Because again, I empathize way too strongly whenever someone describes feeling something strongly. And when I talk to more masculine people, there's more of that sense of calmness. Because even when there is an extreme situation, it's kinda not presented as such, right? Even when a situation is really terrifying and really confusing and really rare, it's never presented as if it was that way. It's more often presented in a way more neutral way, which generally makes it way easier for me to comprehend and not empathize with too strongly. So it just happens that when, in a rare occasion, I discover someone more masculine who I can be closer to, it's just a more comforting and more manageable relationship for me. That's not to say that I've been able to manage these relationships in the past. I've had multiple times when I've intensely tried to disrupt that sense of calmness, right? And where I've intentionally tried to make it more dramatic. Because even though I feel things relatively moderately, I used to have this idea that I had to present myself as if I was more feminine when I was describing my emotions. Because I thought that otherwise those emotions wouldn't get their proper respect. Because it used to be that in those relationships, I was always like, oh, I was the female friend, basically. And since I used to have a way more binary sense of gender identity, I didn't want to present myself as masculine, right? I didn't want to go like, yeah, this isn't really a big deal, but I'm still hurt, right? I needed to be like, yeah, I'm gonna make a big deal out of it so you understand that I'm hurt. And I regret doing that now, because I know how nice it is to have friendships where I can just express myself honestly, because I don't expect extreme emotions to get involved. I expect people to just be able to be more calm and collected. because that's how you're supposed to express yourself when you're in a more masculine situation, and that's incredibly more comfortable for me to express myself in. And this isn't to say that I'm uncomfortable with women. It's simply that I find it very hard to really talk about my problems and my feelings when I'm thinking about someone else's feelings and problems, is all. So it's always been really important to me to have these types of friendships too. Specifically because they are there for me. Specifically because throughout my entire life, I've always gotten along better with women. I'm sure there are more archetypes in my life. I'm sure I gravitate towards other specific types of people too. But these three are the big ones. These three are the ones I've seen repeating so many times that I can categorize. There's this very specific ethos of consumption that people seem to have that I've never understood, which is the entire obsession with presentation, right? When it comes to music, people go like, "Oh, you need to mix better." When it comes to uh, videos, people go like, "Oh, I really like the editing," or so on and so on. There's a specific mindset that things should be appreciated based on the representation. And I think that's the most shallow way to enjoy things. Because presentation can be important. I'm not going to say that the presentation doesn't mean anything. Because, of course, presentation carries with it some specific implications, right? Every choice made in presentation is deliberate. But then people kind of seem to think that the more deliberation that went into presentation, the more that presentation is. Um, what the fuck is the word for that? Intentional, right? People read this type of intentionality into effort or just minute details, right? And to an extent, that's true. To an extent, when you make more choices, you make more deliberate. You add more deliberate nuance to your art, and really, the process of getting good at art generally is just a matter of knowing what you can do more, right? To be good at art, right, to be good at making a YouTube video, I'm not going to say that you have to make an edited video to make a good video, but you kind of have to know how to edit the video to be able to make the choice to not edit the video, you know? So there is some truth to learning these skills and to know the rules before you break them, right? However, when you don't know the rules, you're always going to break them. That's the important part. That when you make art that's completely devoid of restriction, it's always going to be interesting. It might not be good, it might not convey what you want it to convey, but it'll be always interesting, at least to me. And I do think, I do think generally you can make better choices when you have more options, but that doesn't mean that you're making bad art when you have restrictions. And I'm a person who likes to appreciate art fully. I'm never a person who just goes like, oh, I'm just gonna consume content and then move on. I don't really feel like that about anything. However, that doesn't mean I don't do that, right? But it's like some things are meant to be enjoyed like that, right? Like a Dotesmite video isn't enjoyed to be an experience that you really like sit down and watch. A Dotesmite video is supposed to be something that's in the background or functions as a podcast, and that's deliberately how I make my videos. I don't put too much visual detail into my presentation because it's simply unnecessary. And yet people seem to hyperfixate on these things, even though practically, if you care about any of it, it just means that you're a pedant, right? It means that you are looking too deeply into something that you can enjoy, or rather, you're looking too deep into something that is supposed to be enjoyed on a more primal level generally. And it's odd to me. Like, if I play a game, I want to 100% it. I want to be familiar with everything that exists in a game. And when I'm watching a movie, I like to know the production process, I like to know the context around it. When I'm listening to an album, I want to know the artist's discography. I want to be the person who appreciates things that people make and appreciates them in full. I don't like watching things on 1.5 times speed, for example. Like, even when a YouTube video is boring, I don't want to watch it on 1.5 times speed because I feel like I'm missing out on something. But also, I don't really care about presentation that much. Even though I like enjoying things in full, I don't generally like paying too much attention to just visual details, right? I'm not a person who wants to just be fixated on visuals all the time. What I prefer way more is to know what the visuals are about and then hold that aesthetic in my mind while I consider it and just do something else at the same time. I don't know if this is some type of attention deficit, but like I don't enjoy most things enough to just focus on them fully, really. There are some things that I, of course, do that to because they can't really be consumed otherwise, like Azoken or Lane or any of those shows. I focus on fully because that's the only way to really get the most out of them because they're so rife with detail. But most things aren't like that. Most things are way more subdued when it comes to visual flair or when it comes to mixing audio, right? It's like, okay, you can get a lot out of mixing, right, when you're really, really focused on an album. But what's more important is what choices someone made. It's like, did you choose to put distortion on this instrument, or what instruments did you choose to use, and what melodies you chose to use, and how you tie them all together into an experience? Like, to me, that's more interesting than, oh, are these things mixed well? And I can't understand people who have these types of mentalities, right? Like, I don't understand people who go like, oh yeah, it's really important for a movie to not have inconsistencies between shots. When inconsistencies between shots just don't fucking matter. Like, they don't change the story, they don't change the acting, they don't change the visual language. The only thing they change is, oh look, there's something slightly different in a shot. Wow, a movie that you know is fake is revealed to be fake. Like, it doesn't matter at all. It only matters if you aren't enjoying the movie, I guess. And this is really the problem with the mentality that, like, that guy with the classes and a lot of this early internet culture has created, which is like always looking for things to criticize. Because people feel like they need to consume art that they don't like to be a part of the culture, right? And you can't just consume art that you don't like and just move on, right? You have to exactly take notes on why you don't like it, and when the reason you don't like it generally boils down to it's not what I prefer. The only things you can really point out is like, look how fucking stupid the writing is, and the shots are inconsistent, and it doesn't make logical sense, and the mixing is bad, the editing is bad, right? When if you were enjoying the thing, none of that would really matter that much. And people think that, oh, if if you made mixing better, your music would be better. If you made your editing better, your video would be better. And in certain situations, that is true. But generally speaking, I've gotten as much out of videos that haven't been edited at all as I've gotten out of videos that are meticulously edited and that are just really nice to look at. Because it's all about what the video is trying to convey. It's all about why the choices in presentation are made. And I think there's a type of raw enjoyment that I get out of the things that I really enjoy that most people don't. Because when I really enjoy a thing, I just want to dive as deep into it as possible. And when I don't enjoy a thing, I just don't consume it. Like if you look at my Annie list and get past my fucking stupid rating system, even though I haven't updated my Annie list and I don't plan to update it, I don't think I like cataloging the art I consume at all. I think I prefer to just think about it and not know what I've consumed, really. But when you look at the things I have marked down, I never finish something I don't like. The only exception, the one thing in my entire life that I've finished that I don't even like is Fairy Tale. And the reason I finished Fairy Tale is that I thought it would get better, but it just didn't. And I mean, there are parts of things that I finished that I don't like. Like I've watched seasons of TV shows I don't like because I liked previous seasons, and I'm autistic, right? But I don't dwell on them. I just go like, oh yeah, I like the first seasons. I don't like the second seasons, or whatever. And generally, I'm also really selective when it comes to the art I interact with. I just don't go like, oh, I need to know what the culture is talking about. When I watch something or when I listen to something or when I interact with art at all, it's because I know that it has something I enjoy in it, right? I don't look for art based on what's popular. I look for art based on if it has things I enjoy in it. And if it already has things I enjoy in it, I'm gonna watch it and I'm gonna be like, oh, this is pretty good. I'm gonna finish it, or oh, this is not very good. So I'm just gonna immediately drop it. And when I drop something, I don't think about it again. And even when I enjoy something, but I just don't care about it, I just drop it. I don't engage with art I don't enjoy or don't care about. And to an extent, it means I consume way less art than most people who I know, right? To an extent, it means that I'm not constantly listening to music or watching anime or watching TV shows or movies or anything. But I'm fine with that. Whenever I watch something, it's something that I enjoy, and I think that's nice. I think that's a nice way to be, and when I fully enjoy something, I want to have the most appreciation that I can have for it, you know? And that's really nice to me. Everyone says that the only constant is change. This isn't really a controversial opinion or anything really noteworthy. But what's noteworthy is I don't think they mean what I experience. Because for me, it's not only that the only constant is change, but it's also that the change is always constant. I've always changed in the same way. I've always grown in the same way. It's never felt like I'm becoming a different person. It's only felt like my past is being replaced with a new past, and I'm still no different as a human being. It's all felt like I'm just switching out one hat and putting on another, of no substantial difference other than their color and mild differences in texture. Sure, I might now look on my past as a fascist, intellectual, in the dark web of ideas or whatever the fuck you would want to call it. But I know in my heart that at that time I looked back on my past with the same amount of contempt and astonishment when I was thinking of my past as a punk rock street rat who just underage drank and who just didn't have any hope. I remember all of these experiences I've had, and the more time passes, the more similar they get. I remember going on a camping trip with my class, being incredibly disassociated, listening to suicidal music, and thinking about how I had become Jesus. Now, only a few days ago, I started going absolutely insane. But this time I listened to Kanye West and stared into one of my many lamps and thought about the nature of God, and I thought about the nature of myself, and I thought about the composition of light and the natural forces of the universe, all all conspiring against me to push me together and hold me in this mortal coil that I suffer in. The more things change, the more they say the same. Things only get more complicated, more convoluted. There's only more layers added onto the ever present sameness, the constant nothingness that I cannot escape from. Nothing really changes, it only compounds. And it keeps compounding, and my heart keeps pounding. And I know not of an escape from this hell. I only know how to bear with it. And it gets easier, it never gets better. And I know that, but I also know that I only expect change at this point. I expect my current state to become something for a future state to either reminisce upon or hate bitterly, depending on who I have become at that point in time. And that person will still be the same person as I am right now, just with a different source of fire and a different outlook on hate. And that is really the only source of what changes for me. What changes is where my hate is directed at. Whether it be myself or whether it be whatever my racist targets at the moment were a few years ago, or right now it is just the entire world and the systems I'm forced to live in. But the hate always changes, it always compounds, it gets more complicated, more textured, more nuanced, but there is still no escape. No matter how much I convolute myself, no matter how much I convolute my hatred, it still remains the same. The essence never differs. In quantum mechanics, there is this new emergent theory called superdeterminism. Basically, what it means is that the conditions set up for a particular experiment are determined before they ever happened. So it means that not only is the results of experimentation deterministic, but also that the experiment itself happening is deterministic. So what that ends up meaning is that no matter how much you try to control the conditions of an experiment, it is never going to be inherently separate from the experiment, which can lead to consistent results that are still to an extent biased. This is obviously not the correct or in-depth way to explain this theory, but I'm not quite well versed enough in quantum mechanics to properly explain it, and it's also beyond the scope of what I'm talking about. The critics of that theory often bring up that it creates a form of retrocausality, right? Where since the initial conditions of the experiment determine the results of the experiment, and since all of those things are determined by the same physical phenomena, it can seem like the results of the experiment are retrocausal. That means the results travel back in time to set up the experiment. Now, since the theory itself posits that each of these things happening is independent but correlates in such a way to create a causality that isn't isolated within an experiment, it doesn't really apply to that theory. But when it comes to the nature of retrocausality, it seems to be the perfect analogy. Because retrocausality isn't just things literally traveling through time. Retrocausality isn't just things appearing in the past out of nowhere. What retrocausality is the future results of something making past actions inevitable. For example, if I were to say that capitalism is a machine that's brought to the past from the future through retrocausality, what I'm not saying is that capitalism jumped in a time machine and then invented agriculture, but rather what I'm saying is that the initial conditions for any configuration of capitalism were present from the time that agriculture itself was invented and that wealth became an extant phenomena. There was never any avoiding capitalism. There is never going to be any avoiding capitalism becoming a technologically superior force and completely overwhelming anything that we might consider human. That is simply unavoidable. And that is why capitalism is necessarily retrocausal. The fact that this future result is inevitable means that it was inevitable from the first step towards capitalism. Why am I talking about all of this? Why am I talking about quantum mechanics and Nicklandian accelerationism or whatever the fuck my brain decides to come up with? Well, it's to frame my next point. And generally, to take a small tangent, I don't really like framing because I think framing creates an emotional expectation that people should not feel compelled to abide by. Because the act of framing prepares someone for a conclusion without the necessary information to confirm its validity, right? So if I were to, for example, tell you about how I've had all of these negative experiences with the state and then go like, therefore the state should be abolished. I have presented this issue as something that you should care about if you respect me or care about me. The approach I generally prefer is talking exactly about the steps that I took to reach a conclusion and hope that someone follows. However, in this specific case, it is necessary to understand what I mean by retrocausal. What I'm about to say next is dependent on the fact that you can grasp this concept because the significance of this can't be overstated when it comes to how I think about myself. Influence is retrocausal. The fact that something exists in the future necessarily proves that it was set up to exist in the past. For example, if we take an easy example, uh, we can just look at the Dotesmite channel on YouTube, right? The fact that the Dotesmite channel exists means that the entire history of humanity had to exist. And when Digi started making videos, that inevitably and intentionally set up the conditions for a future uh, derivative movement, right? The fact that Digi started making videos at all meant that inevitably she would try to have a result, right? In the same way that a scientist sets up an experiment expecting to have some type of result, Digi set up her channel expecting to have some type of influence. And then Plunder, No, Lily, all of those post-Digi people followed up and repeated this process. They set up their channels expecting to have some type of influence. And you can, of course, trace this back all the way through the chain of influences to the beginnings of literature and so on, but that's not within the scope of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that there's no way to yourself create something new. You can only set up the conditions necessitated by whatever is to come in the future. You can only surrender yourself in service of creating whatever is next. And you cannot predict what's next. You cannot invent the future because the future invented you. When you're trying to be forward thinking, really what's happening is that you're being controlled by the future. This is unavoidable. There is no way to really innovate something new, but rather discover something that something needed you to discover. And this is not saying that it's a spiritual matter necessarily. This isn't saying that this approach necessitates some greater universal force. But rather, this is the inevitable course of action for any type of creativity. Unless you're directly and intentionally not being forward thinking at all, unless you're being deliberately, uncritically nostalgic, you will always be in service of a future you do not know. You will always be serving a master that you could not even comprehend. Let's take another analogy. We can look at Kanye West, the most forward thinking artist that has the type of influence that he has. When we look at 808s and Heartbreak, it wasn't as if Kanye just made that album not thinking that it would have influence, but rather precisely because he knew that it would have influence, he knew that it would be emotionally resonant with the type of person he wanted to connect to. Kanye and 808s are necessarily connected to the music it would end up influencing. That's a part of the work itself, not from a future perspective, but that was a part of the work itself at the time it was being made. And I know a lot of people go like, oh, I can't really like 808s because I connected with the albums it would go on to influence, right? But it was always going to influence those albums. It was always bound to serve a future movement of young people who would hear that album and who would be influenced by it. 808s and Heartbreaks carries within it Chief Keef, maybe not Chief Keef, probably Chief Keef, but also more obvious influences like Lil Peep and XXXTentacion would all be created from the paradigm that Kanye set up, and Kanye knew this. Every piece of art intentionally draws influences. There's no way to make any type of art that's disconnected from time. Really, the only thing you can choose is which things in the past you want to make real. Because that's the choice you have as a person in the present. You can't control the present, you can't control the future, but you are the one determining what the past is. Because if old soul and R&B and jazz records weren't discovered by hip hop artists, they would become a way less significant part of the past. The fact is that when Kanye started up chopping soul samples into hip hop beats and speeding them up, he basically created the past in which soul is still important. And it's obviously not exclusively Kanye, but it's definitely something that he influenced a lot. So, as a person in the present, your role in the march of time, if you would like to call it such, is not to figure out the future, but rather figure out the past. Because you can choose what past you want to make real. You can choose which past you want to be important. You can't choose your future, you can't choose the present. But that doesn't mean that you are powerless. Because when things are retrocausal, the future will cause the past. If you go on SoundCloud and you find an obscure track with no listens, and then you decide to draw influence from that track, then that track would again exist in the larger scope of the artistic world. And to me, that's the role of the artist, really. Obviously, it is important to express yourself. Obviously, it's important to try to innovate and not just look at things in the past. But to me, the only way to innovate is to just select the past that you want to be real. The last month of my life has basically just been constantly increasing insanity in increasingly convoluted ways. Like, I just keep going insane, just randomly in every different direction. I don't know why this is happening. I know the recent thing is the sugar fucking withdrawals, which I'm mostly over now, but before that, I had like a fucking weird depressive episode where I got overstimulated by any type of socializing. And then before that happened, I had my weird mixed episode that I fucking just made too much videos in, and I've just been going fucking insane. And I'm just like, oh, what's gonna be the next thing? Am I gonna get a break for a second? Am I gonna have a moment of respite where I can regain my sanity? Because when I quit alcohol, I went fairly sane because it was like, oh, I had been abusing alcohol, right, for like basically a year. And it was really easy to go insane when I was abusing alcohol. It was really easy to just like constantly have my thoughts just completely scattered and just never be able to really formulate a very coherent thought. And when I was also really pushing myself with watching Moe anime, that also completely mind broke me. And just combining those two things were just made me go fucking consistently insane. And then when I stopped drinking after like about a week, I regained a lot of my mental clarity, and then I realized, oh, I can't stop drinking because I literally don't know how to calm down. I'm literally incapable of calming down at all as a person. So I still drink once in a while so I can calm the fuck down, which is nice, which is comfy. It's just something I need to avoid doing on a consistent basis because I like having the type of mental clarity I used to have a month ago. And before that, I think I had a really bad depressive episode because I get seasonal affective disorder. And only right now the winter is passing, but my sleep schedule is such that I'm barely ever awake during the actual sunlight hours. So it feels like the winter is still here, even though the snow has all melted. And I'm stuck in a cycle of my own retardation. I'm stuck in a cycle just entirely born out of me being a fucking retard. Like it's not as bad as it was like whenever my seasonal affective disorder was really bad. Because right now it's like easy to like go outside and do things, and both physically because there's not snow fucking everywhere, but also mentally because I'm not really like after the sugar withdrawals, and I'm not really just completely physically exhausted and or psychologically exhausted, which in turn makes me physically exhausted. So yeah, but still, it feels like the last few months have been just going from one insanity to the next insanity, and I just feel the fucking tides of time washing away all of my membranes in my fucking brain. And what I've realized is that every time I go insane, I just default to weird Christian thought patterns, where I just go like when I have some type of episode, I just go like, oh, this must be the doing of demons, or oh, let's think about God and how his hands are holding me together, because not learned, but rather I thought about their pressure and how theirs completely crushing you from all sides at every point in time. And I was like, oh, that's the hands of God holding me together, because I was having an episode. And I just think about Jesus and the Bible, and I just become weird and Christian. Like, this has been a consistent pattern throughout my entire life. Like, the more unstable my mental health is, the more just weirdly religious I get, which is odd, because I didn't really grow up religious, right? Because my mom is a fairly staunch atheist, right? And even though I live in Estonia, I've been surrounded by a disproportionate amount of religion. Like when I was when I was a teenager, like not a teenager, when I was like 12 to 13, at that point in time, my best friend was kind of Christian because his family was, even though he wasn't really Christian. And my father's side of my family is relatively religious. And I went to a religious kindergarten because that was the best one, right? That was the kindergarten that had like the Waldorf principles or whatever, which are supposed to be like really good for some reason. I think they're good. Like I looked into it and I was like, oh yeah, that's based comparatively to traditional forms of education. But yeah, anyway, I've grown up near a weird amount of Christianity for my family not being religious and my country not being religious. And it's also weird because I've had like multiple just strange religious experiences every time my mental health is bad. Like it just feels like God is interacting with my life when I'm going insane. And that's why I came up with the moniker Schizo Christian, which is just Gnosticism, except I'm only a Gnostic when I'm going insane. Otherwise, I'm just irreligious or agnostic or whatever. I bounce between agnostic and Gnostic, right? Those are my two religions. When I'm feeling normal, I'm agnostic. When I'm not feeling normal, I'm agnostic. Anyway, so it's just weird because like when I was having my episode a few days ago, I was just like learning how to make the sign of the cross, because if I saw a demon, I would need to ward them off, because I thought I would see demons. It's odd how my brain works. And for like around a year, when I was a fascist, I was I identified as a Christian theist. I think my memory might be wrong, because I don't know if these two things are interconnected, but they very well might have been. So this is my reconstructed memory from my different memories, because it kind of checks out. So there was about a week where I didn't have a proper meal, but since my mom was out of town, I had to come back to this apartment, right, and feed like the fish and the cat, I think, because I used to have a cat. But yeah, when that was happening, right, I had to come here, and every day. And the only food I had in that time frame was coming here and eating some nuts from this drawer. And I'm pretty sure in this time frame, like in the exact same time frame where I was just not eating for some reason, like I think I was too anxious to go to the store for like 2 days, and then after 2 days of not eating, I just stopped being hungry, and I was like, oh, I'm not hungry. That means I don't have to eat anymore. I'm free from having to eat. I'll eat when I get hungry, and then I didn't really get hungry for a week because I was just snacking on some nuts when I came here, and that was my only source of food. And I think at that point I was looking into Pizzagate really heavily, and I was like, I this experience is making me into a Christian now for some reason. I think that's where my journey with Christianity started, when I used to be like somewhat religious, and then I was like, fuck, I don't like organized religion. I've never liked organized religion, so I just spent a lot of time like looking into various like religious theory, right? I was never a trad calf, to make that clear. Like trad calves are fucking awful. They don't have any merit because they're not actually Catholic. None of them are. But the first thing I did was I looked into Christian theism because that made sense to me. It's like, oh, okay, so I've heard convincing arguments for why there should be a God, right? But like also, I haven't heard any convincing arguments for why it should be the Christian God. So Christian theism basically posits that Jesus was a very influential philosopher who basically just explained the nature of God, right? That's kind of Christian theism. Like not exactly, but that's a really simplified down form. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what I am now. I guess I'm a Christian theist now. And then eventually I met some Orthodox Christians, and not fake Orthodox people who actually converted to Orthodox Christianity, like and are a part of the church. I was like, okay, time to research Orthodox Christianity. And then I just kept reading on Orthodox Christian theology for a while. And I was like, I guess I should go to church now. And I kept putting it off until I listened to some Common Filth fucking podcasts. Because Common Filth used to have, like, you might have seen his Tumblr Resistance videos. He was this really fucking reactionary conservative person. Now he makes Nostalgia Wound, which is a let's play channel, and that's really everyone's stream. Everyone, or video game review channel. But yeah, that's everyone's stream. Everyone who watches YouTube really just wants to make let's plays. This is what I'm convinced of. Or fucking video game analysis videos, or maybe anime analysis videos, I don't fucking know. But I think this is what everyone wants from this wretched website, and it's not a wretched website. I'm just fucking. I've been watching the end of trash. But yeah, anyway, I think everyone kind of wants to um, wants to have these just passion projects where they don't have to confront any type of reality. I think people want YouTube to serve as escapism instead of fucking having to descend further and further into reactionary madness. And I remember I was watching a Common Filth video and or podcast, and he was like, yeah, I I read this theory that the number of the beast, or the mark of the beast, is a microchip, and the numerical components of the biblical beast, right, they're all explained through various types of software, right? So it was like, okay, so there's this fucking eventual conspiracy by the US government that's inevitable, which will lead to everyone being microchipped in service of Satan, and the only way you can save your soul is to reject this fucking. Really, what he meant to say is techno capital, but I don't remember how he phrased it. And it's like I was listening to that, and that made inherent sense to me. Like those types of like ideas have always kind of made inherent sense to me. Like I guess that's a big part of why I'm drawn to these Christian ideas when I'm going insane, because I default to a more primal understanding of the world, and that understanding ties really well into various like Christian esotericism. And yeah, and after I watched that, I was like, I really need to go to church now. Like the only churches at the time, but because I still had really intense social anxiety at that point, and I never ended up going to church because my social anxiety was just too strong to be able to go anywhere, right? And I just couldn't handle being outside at all. That was during my hikikomori arc, where I just didn't fucking leave my house unless absolutely necessary. Like I didn't go to the store for multiple days and just starved because I had anxiety that was that bad. But yeah, anyway, what ended up happening was that I discovered, like, oh, all the Orthodox churches near me speak Russian, which obviously they would. And so, like, let me look into Lutheran churches. Lutheranism is kind of cool. I guess, like, it's not an Orthodox church, but you know, that's close to me. That's kind of neat. Then I watched like a live stream, and I was like, nah, I guess I'm kind of done with this. And then I was just like tacitly Christian for a while. I just went back to Christian theism because I was like, nah, this church stuff is too scary, too scary. What the fuck was I saying? Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's always been like this inherent like base level escapism to me. Like it's not like reassuring, but it's like solidifying, right? It just instantly makes the world make sense in my brain. Yeah. There is a massive advantage to being primarily nocturnal, and that's being able to just go on an evening stroll during the spring morning. Because this early spring morning is one of my favorite times. Like, it's only comparable to a fall night. It feels so fresh, so new. I can feel the inspiration bubbling up. I can feel the life surge into me. And it's rejuvenating, it's elating, it's nice. It's just very, very nice. And I've been thinking about political philosophy a lot recently. If you couldn't tell, I somehow slipped back into this hobby. And it is important to remember that political philosophy, like normal philosophy, is just a hobby. Because it's not like it changes you or the world or affects anything in any real significant way. It's just something you do to pass the time. And the reason I'm reluctant about completely embracing this hobby is that every time before, or rather the one time before where I got really into it, it just progressively ruined my life. It just progressively made my life miserable. Because I've been watching The End of Trash and listening to. Well, I watched The End of Trash after I listened to Plunder's new thing where she talked about The End of Trash, and I was finally curious enough to just start watching the whole thing. I haven't finished it yet. It's really long. But yeah, the last time I got into political philosophy was when I was 15. And then I was like, yep, time to write 3 books in a year and just make my entire life miserable. Because I need to start making a career. Because I thought I would die otherwise, basically. And it's surreal to now be just reading the Luz and fucking the other guy. The Board. And all of these philosophers who have been interested in sometimes for like 4 years or 5 years even, but more like just a year or two, and I've just never gotten around to reading them, and now I'm just reading all of these left-wing philosophers which I never really fully dived into before. Like when I was a fascist, I still read some left-wing philosophy because I obviously needed to know what my opposition was talking about, and I wasn't really that into it. I read the start of Capital, I read Stirner, I read some other things I don't really remember, but like it was never like that in depth. It was mostly just discussing political philosophy and discourse, which is the most self-harming thing you could ever fucking do. Like just sincerely. Like when Shrek, that guy came onto YouTube and I first saw his videos, it was fucking surreal. Because that just portrayed a reality that no one could ever portray as real, right? It reified this absurd culture of obscure discord philosophies that are believed in exclusively by teenagers, right? It just made that seem real, and it's so inherently absurd that when you pretend that any of it is actually like true, it just becomes funny. And I don't personally like J-Reg, whoever. I don't think he's particularly funny. I don't think he's interesting. I don't think, like, I know more about obscure political philosophies than he does because he isn't really into any of them, and when I've just been into like most of them at some point in my life, or at least talk to people who sincerely believe in them for fucking hours upon hours upon fucking hours. But yeah, like when Plunder talks about how she lost like a year of her life to just making YouTube videos that were way too ambitious and weren't even fulfilling. I just think back on like my experience writing the books, but like for me, it was kind of fulfilling, not because I could write books, but rather because I could gain respect, and since that was something I've always wanted, and since that's something that's really hard to get when you're 15, it was fulfilling in that specific way. But yeah, I'm currently reading Anti-Oedipus. I read two books. Which two books I read? Capitalist Realism and Society of the Spectacle. I read those two books. I read 4 books this year, which isn't great, but it's an improvement. Given how I don't think I read a single book in 2019. I mean, I read some long form essays, I guess, but not real books. So yeah, going back to reading is really nice, because reading political philosophy is one of the very few things that I just genuinely have fun with. It's one of the very few things I just genuinely enjoy and like doing. Very few things have this quality for me. People are fighting there. That's odd. But anyway, I don't really enjoy most things. I don't really have fun with the vast majority of things, but in the past few days I've actually had a lot of fun just spending all day consuming, because the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is out, or the first 2 episodes of it are out, and I greatly enjoyed both of them, even though the last 15 minutes of episode 2 is probably the most retarded television I've ever fucking seen. It's genuinely terrible, but it was enjoyable, because like it might suffer from like the Homestuck problem. Damn, those people are really fucking going at it. Damn. But yeah, it might end up suffering from the Homestuck problem, right, where it's all set up and no payoff. But I've really been enjoying the setup, because I can imagine so many different payoffs to it. And I know it's kind of setting myself up to be disappointed, but like there are some cool plot lines I really like the plotline where Falcon just has financial troubles, because being a hero doesn't actually get any real funds, and even though he has like a lot of recognition due to being a part of the Avengers, right? He doesn't really have any power against fucking capitalism. I think that's an interesting plotline, and I'm excited to see how that gets dealt with, because I'm assuming it'll probably maybe have a cool payoff. I'm not expecting it to be intelligent or compelling, but I'm just hoping it's cool, really. And the plotline where just some random guy is now Captain America is also really cool, and obviously it's gonna be really predictable, right? Okay, this is my prediction how it goes, right? The new Captain America ends up, since he's kind of an asshole, since he kind of wants power, right? He ends up getting the super soldier serum, right? And he thinks like, oh, this will make me live up to the real Captain America, right? And then when he uses the super soldier serum, he'll turn evil for some reason, and then the Falcon will have to fight him, and against all odds win the fight, right? And when he wins the fight, he takes the shield, like he holds the shield up and goes like, I'm the new Captain America. That's obviously what's going to happen in this fucking show. Like, that's just what it's set up to be. I have hope that it's gonna be that, because if it happens like that, it's gonna be really fun, and I'm really gonna enjoy it, because I'm very easily impressed when it comes to things like this, because I just really like cool things. I like things that are neat. I like action movies and shonens and all that stuff. It's really just enjoyable for me. And I've also been watching, of course, The End of Trash, I've also been re-listening to the first Crabstack podcast that was on, the third episode of the Crabstack podcast, which was the first time I talked to Noah and Plunder. And given that they changed my entire life and are some of my best friends I've ever had, it's a really fucking insane experience listening to the podcast and just seeing the moments where it just stopped being awkward and it was like, oh wow, that's how we became friends, huh? It's really strange. It's odd. And yeah, also the end of Trash, but I already talked about that. Oh yeah, Asmonkill started the stream again, which means that there's like a gazillion hour harvest every day now. Although I don't watch most of like the Asmonkill Twitch clips, I only enjoy particular ones. Like this is why I don't understand why no thank you. This is a no thank you call out now. This is a no thank you call out video now. Do you hear this no thank you? I know you're fucking watching this. It's very close. I go. I don't understand what's going on in OSRS. I can't watch video about OSRS. I don't know what's happening because I've just. At this point, I've watched enough Asmongold videos that I can just infer what things in World of Warcraft mean. I have never played World of Warcraft. I logged in for maybe 2 hours when Classic came out and I was like, damn, this is a clusterfuck and I don't know what to do, and never played World of Warcraft again. And I still understand everything that's going on because I've just been fucking watching Asmongold videos because they're good, right? So, call out post to know thank you for not watching RuneScape videos because some of them are really good and I think he would enjoy them, but he goes like, oh no, I don't understand what's happening, I'm confused. The way I learned how to play the game was by watching videos. I just think he doesn't care, like, honestly, like, and he can't get invested in it, which is absolutely fair. I'm just slightly annoyed by this phrasing because I've just, like, I have no idea what the Mythic Plus fucking dungeon or whatever is. I have absolutely no clue how that works in practice. However, since I've heard Asmongold talk about Mythic Plus enough, I can basically infer that it's just a challenging, repeatable dungeon that you can farm out. Just a guess, it's probably right? It's just, whatever. But yeah, oh yeah, political philosophy, yeah, and I'm really hoping that getting into it again doesn't destroy my life again, because I really don't want to write political theory, right? Since I really enjoy reading political theory, I go like, oh, I should devote my life to writing political theory. No, it's the fucking shitty mentality that causes people to become underpaid game developers, right? Where they go like, oh, I enjoy this art, that means I must enjoy making this art, right? And I don't really enjoy writing political philosophy regularly. I have a lot of fun just occasionally doing it, like once in a while where I have a really interesting idea I want to write down. I can be like, yo, I can write some political theory, and I can enjoy like doing it for a few hours and be like, yay, I wrote political theory. But just doing it over and over again and treating it like a fucking grind or a job is just the most miserable experience imaginable for me, because I don't want to come up with new things to say about politics. I don't want to come up with new angles that you could use to fucking improve your own political understanding, right? It's basically distressing for me to do. And yeah, that just kind of means that I need to not get too into political theory, because I know I'll go down that path again. And that'll just be fucking annoying. But yeah, the sun is really red because it's behind the clouds. Can it show up on camera, I wonder? Apparently it just stops recording then, I guess. But yeah, it kinda shows up. I can't fucking bother with this camera. I used to get really annoyed by the fact that it can't fucking focus ever. Especially when the sun is rising so fucking fast that there's a limited time frame, right? So I would just have to like keep praying to God and hoping like, oh, camera, please focus on the fucking rising sun because it's really pretty right now, right? But I just can't do it, and now it's like a fucking, what was the fucking phrase? Like the Japanese phrase for like just I don't fucking remember. It's just like, oh, whatever at this point. That's basically my point. There's this specific kind of perceived permanence that comes with autism, right? It's like when I was talking in the hikikomori video about like what's the psychological profile of a hikikomori, I think I was kind of describing just the psychological profile of an autistic person, because I think autistic people have a fairly hard time seeing things as processes. I think autistic people kind of need to see a thing as having a discrete start and a discrete end, because I know that I've always been like this. I know that I've always just been unable to see things as like constant, right? It's like I'm getting better at it the older I get. Like I mean, it's not the older I get, really. It's really the more fucking old school RuneScape I play. Like genuinely, just having an MMO to grind for like 3,000 hours, maybe even more at this point. Although probably not. It's probably like 3,000 hours in like 1 hour or something. It's probably something around that. But like having an MMO to grind for like 3,000 hours really puts everything into perspective. Because it's like there are certain achievements you get, right, but it's never a discrete start and end point, right? Although you're still functioning within a frame of like a larger start point and a larger end point, because everyone in old school starts at the exact same place, right? There are no classes, there are no races, right? Everyone is just a blank slate, and the end goal is whatever you want it to be. Now, my end goal has always been to get an infernal max cape, and that's basically just a cosmetic combination of the two hardest achievements in the game. No, it's not the two hardest achievements in the game, it's the two hardest achievements that a normal player can hope to attain. The max cape just means you've grinded the game for thousands of hours, and the infernal cape means that you're pretty decent at the game mechanics, right? That's basically it. And my goal has always been the combination of those two capes, because when I started playing, I as I always do, I obsessively looked at the wiki, right, and I obsessively looked at what the biggest achievements are, right, and of course I came across the max cape, which is, well, I would argue that it's destructive to the game, insofar as I don't think skilling to max should be incentivized. I think the max cape should be nerfed, at least significantly, or it should be entirely cosmetic, but I know that that won't ever be implemented into the game, because first of all it's not overpowered, like really compared to the amount of effort it takes to get it, it's a perfectly balanced item. And secondly, since it was already implemented into the game, the effects it caused can't really be undone. Because it's like, it forces people to skill, even when they don't like skilling, right? Like, there are obviously some game mechanics that incentivize skilling, right? There are diaries, some of which are basically mandatory if you want to do something efficiently. The diaries are also a problem to me. I don't like the diaries. It's basically like a list of just chores you kind of have to do if you have the requirements to do those chores. And I generally don't think they're healthy for the game, because again, I don't think skilling for most players should be encouraged, and the diaries do that. Although the thing with the diaries is that none of the requirements they have are in any way unreasonable, at least in my opinion. Like, you can get a diary cape just by casually playing the game for a while and not ever really going hard on skilling. But when you get the max cape, you have to have really dedicated, concerted skilling grinds, which is just basically an endurance test about like how much you can put up with just doing the same thing over and over again. I love skilling grinds. I'm so fucking happy whenever I get to just do the same thing for 200 hours in a row and just feel accomplishment from it. But it's not for most people. Most people don't want to do it, right? And when the game has this end game item, right, that's oftentimes by far the best item to use, it's like, it kind of fucking sucks, right? Because it means like, oh, I'm just a normal player, right? I'm just a normal person just enjoying the game. Oh, now I have to spend 5,000 hours fucking doing things I don't like. Even though it's practically not gonna be 5,000 hours for anyone who's like playing the game seriously, but that aside. Yeah, so and that's one thing. And Infernal Cape is this end game challenge that's not really as difficult as people would say it is. It's just something that most people don't enjoy, right? Because it's just something you have to practice for like 50 hours to get it down, and then you have to not have like then you have to do like a run that lasts for like 2 hours and not choke it at any point in time. So it's very understandably very frustrating for most people. And I'm currently kinda low-key grinding it out. Although right now my internet isn't functional enough that I can really decide that I want to go for it. So I'm just kinda doing other things for the time being. But the thing with the Inferno, right, is that it's one of the most impressive accomplishments you can have in the game. Although it's kinda ruined by the fact that people just pay someone like $200 to do the fucking challenge for them, which kinda ruins the prestige, but it doesn't really matter that much. When I know that I've done it, like, fairly, it just means that I'm not really impressed by anyone else when they have the item. What was it? Oh, yeah. So, basically what I'm saying is that OSRS has always had a definite endpoint for me. It's getting these two items and combining them. That's always been my goal, because that's one of the coolest things in the game to me. So I just want to have that item. So it's a long process, right? And it has a discrete start point, and it has a discrete end point. Oh, there's a squirrel! Can you see it? No, you can't, because the camera is shit. Yeah. Anyway, it still has this definitive start and end, but when you're doing it, you realize that it's not like every single step you take is like this significant step. It's just a slow process of getting to the point where you can achieve all of these things, and that has really helped me to come to terms with seeing things as continuous processes instead of anything else. And it has been really helpful for me. Like, even if you want to be like, oh, me, Maru, you wasted thousands of hours of your life on an MMO, right? But it's like, I enjoyed all the time I spent. And also, look, squirrel, look. And yeah, I also just genuinely learned a lot from it too. So I think it's just a very positive experience for me. Because it seems to be really hard for autistic people to understand that things are often just processes instead of being anything that discrete. And I think that's the reason why I have a better understanding of how that works than most autistic people do. I just want to step on the squirrel right now. It's really nice. I like seeing small animals out and about. I like seeing various animals just wandering around the city. I'm just getting closer so I can just look at the squirrel closer. I'm sorry that the camera is shaking blurry and you can't see it, but this is it's a time for me. There are birds there. There's the squirrel. I'm gonna let the squirrel be. That was an adventure. See, things like this is why I like being outside early in the morning and late at night. Because during the day, no animals are out in the city. Like, sometimes they are, but generally all of them come out during the night and especially the evening and the morning. And that's really nice to me. But yeah, I'm so fucking soothed right now. This fucking walk has been so fucking comfy. Like you couldn't even understand that. I really like being outside when the sun is coming up, because it feels like it's washing over me and it's washing away all of my fucking exhaustion. I just fucking I think like, I know some of you won't like this sentiment, but I think just being outside near nature is just very good for mental health, and it's obviously not possible for everyone, right? It's obviously not something that everyone can do, but it just helps me so much every time I do it. So I think there's merit in the idea that going outside might be good, because it's good for me, and it might be good for other people who don't realize that it would be good for them. But yeah, anyway, I've always been like this. I've never, when I was younger, understood the fact that things can be a process, right? Like when I was writing my books, for example, it was always just like, okay, I have to do this for like fucking as long as I can before I just completely just burn myself out and crash. So I just only did that, right? I was like, okay, I need to get this done so I can get the next thing done, so I can get the next thing done, so I can get the next thing done. And it was a process, right? But I was seeing it as a series of goals I need to reach. And this is an anecdote from when I was really young, right? I was in kindergarten, and I somehow fucked up some crayons, like some small crayons. I think I was rubbing them too hard because I thought it felt nice. I think that would be my guess, because that's something I would do with crayons. And so, since I was doing that, the kindergarten teacher was like, oh, don't do that. If you're gonna do that, use the big crayons, right? And then a few months later, or maybe a year later, I don't really remember, I was still using the big crayons. I never used the small crayons again. And the teacher was like, oh, why are you using the big crayons? You're big enough that you should be using the small ones. And I was like, because you told me to use the big crayons. Because I couldn't understand that was something temporary, right? I just thought that, oh, if I have to use the big crayons, it means that I'll always have to use the big crayons. But most people could understand, right? I think at that point in time, that the fact that they were scolded for using small crayons wrong just means that they should wait until they use them again, right? I think most people have this innate sense of like pushing boundaries. I'm climbing this fucking thing right now because I really enjoy climbing it. It's always a really fun tactile experience, and I've done it with enough times with one hand that I'm not really like nervous about doing it again because I'm just so fucking used to the motions it takes to climb this. Do I want to go to the top today? Because it's kind of a pain. Yeah, fuck it, do it for the fucking video, even though I don't really feel like it, because it'll be a really cool fucking shot, and I'll enjoy having that. But I think most people come with like an innate sense that these types of boundaries are something to be pushed, right? But I don't think autistic people do. Because again, or maybe it's not autistic people, maybe it's just people who are similar to me, and I just happen to be autistic. People who are similar to me just treat these things like a permanent fixture in their lives. And just can't recognize that responses to stimuli might be wildly inconsistent depending on the time and day and everything like that. Again, I'm gonna get down from this fucking tower pyramid structure. Fuck. Fuck. I came down the wrong way because I always forget how to come down properly. But yeah, like similar things happened constantly with my mom, right? Where I was like, I would go and tell my mom like, hey, I'm depressed, or hey, I'm getting bullied, right? And then since she was like, no, that's not happening, right? Because she just thought it was like some isolated incident because I only told her once, right? She was like, no, that's not happening, right? You're just sad, or someone was just mean to you, right? Because she couldn't understand that these were repeated patterns, and that I wouldn't tell her if they weren't repeated patterns. She was like, no, that's not happening. So I just thought that my mom would never believe that those things were happening to me. And so I didn't tell her about that type of stuff again, right? And then she at one point decided, like, I think that was after I got admitted to the psych ward with depression and so on. I think she at that point decided like that, oh, I need to be a mother now and I need to listen to these issues. And at that point I was so used to her not actually caring about anything I tell her that she just was like, she was trying to be helpful, but was just really pushy, especially given how she had functionally neglected me up until then. And yeah, that caused a shit ton of conflict because, again, I'm incredibly autistic and I just couldn't understand any of it at the time. But yeah, oh yeah, there's this thing I wanted to talk about earlier. Like it's kind of weird. Oh, there's another squirrel. They're out in fucking full force today, and it's a different one because its tail is different. At least I think it is. It looks different. I'm not gonna go hunt. Maybe I'm gonna hunt the squirrel, you know, for just for fun. Just go, just film the squirrel for a bit. Oh no, it's running away. Yeah, I think it just doesn't want to be near a big scary human too much. But yeah, I've always kind of had a conservative set of impulses. Like this is weird about me. Like when it comes to my natural inclinations towards things, they're very much not progressive, and they're generally just like somewhat conservative, just as a tendency. So when I have any type of progressive idea, it's always something that I had to convince myself of. And I've been seeing this mentality more and more, that if you're not naturally progressive, you're some type of evil person or so and so on. And it's just another case of this fucking. It's another case of like the same mentalities. I'm just gonna leave this girl. This girl has had enough of me. She's really pretty too. Like incredibly. It's a really gorgeous animal. But yeah, and a lot of people just seem to be. I don't wanna phrase it like that, but a lot of people seem to be bigoted towards people who naturally or have been manufactured to have bigoted impulses, right? Because I'm not gonna say most people are essentially bigoted, but like it's like some people just have been subject to conditions that made them conservative, right? Whether it's definitely or not definitely, it's most likely some part genetic, right? From all the research I've seen, I think there is probably a genetic component to politics, or if not a genetic one, it has a very, very distinct passage through family lines, through social conditioning and so on and so on. And I think a lot of people just keep trying to justify their bigotry towards people who might just have more of these impulses, either through their nature or nurture, right? And these are the people who constantly go like, oh, we need to accept all of these people, and it's like, and then they go and like, oh, we can't have the paradox of tolerance, right? We can't tolerate bigots, because if we tolerate bigots, we will tolerate bigotry, and if someone is oppressed, everyone is oppressed, right? And so on and so on. Like they're literally just basically get incredibly radical, right? Even though they usually aren't. When the implication comes up that that may be being just completely unresponsive and just completely intolerant towards bigoted people might not really help their cause, right? It might not really reduce bigotry because you're not gonna convince a bigot by fucking being like, oh, you're an evil person, right? Because if you have these intrinsic conservative impulses, right, and when you don't perceive yourself as an evil person for having them, right, then just having the other side screech at you, being like, oh, you need to be a heckin' decent person and agree with us, right? It's only gonna alienate those people further. So this is why I'm really for the idea of just respecting people. Because I know that I just intrinsically mostly have conservative reactions, and I mean not in the way like, oh, when I see two men kissing, I think it's disgusting, right? Even though I don't think it would be wrong if someone had that reaction, if they did not act upon it in any actually like damaging way, right? But more rather like I intrinsically feel this sense that people shouldn't really stand out, like or that people shouldn't really try to be special or different in meaningful ways. Not because I believe in it, right? You fucking seen my channel. You've probably watched my friends' videos, right? You know that I don't surround myself with fucking conformists, and you know that I'm not a conformist. But when I see someone like being extravagant or in any way, really, I just go like, fucking what gives you the right to do this thing? And other such impulses, right? I'm not saying that that's the extent of my conservative impulses. Like I think I'm also like slightly more transphobic than average, I would say. Just on an intrinsic level, I don't know how much my transphobia in my history has been negative experiences with trans people and indoctrination, and how much of it is just some disgust reaction. But I know in my past I've had those experiences, and I also know that I'm somewhat more predisposed to various racialist concepts than most people are, and there's just ways of dealing with that aren't being racist, right? Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, I never have a racist impulse a day in my life anymore. It's just the racist impulses I have are like, yo, I think black people should use their ethnic magics. Like, it's just fucking nonsense, and it's just fun at that point. But I didn't mean to ramble on for this long. The video should have been over like fucking 10 minutes ago. I just got interrupted by those fucking squirrels. Yeah, I guess that's the end of part 1. Part 2 coming whenever part 2 comes. Yeah.